As we approach the end of Module 5, we turn to one of the most important practical implications of cross-cultural gerontology: cultural competence and sensitivity in aging care. Over the past two lectures, we examined how aging varies across populations and across cultures. We explored how race, ethnicity, gender, migration, and global policy contexts shape later life experiences. Now, we move from understanding diversity to acting responsibly within it. Cultural competence in gerontology serves as the foundation to ethical, effective, and equitable care. Older adults are not an homogeneous group. They represent diverse life histories, cultural identities, generational experiences, and structural exposures. If we do not account for this diversity, we risk reinforcing inequity and, at times, ageism. Cultural competence is often defined as the ability of healthcare providers and systems to deliver care that respects and responds to diverse cultural values, beliefs, and practices. However, more recent scholarship, including work in geriatrics education, emphasizes that cultural competence must go beyond knowledge of customs or traits. It must include cultural humility, a lifelong commitment to self-reflection and openness; structural competence, understanding how institutions and policies shape disparities; and intersectionality, recognizing that age intersects with race, gender, class, sexuality, and disability. In geriatrics, this is particularly important because older adults carry decades of lived experience, shaped by historical events, social policy, discrimination, migration, and cultural expectations. Generational identity itself becomes part of culture. Scholars and practitioners argue that diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, in gerontology and geriatrics must be integrated into care, not isolated. This includes teaching learners to recognize implicit bias, addressing disparities in health outcomes across racial and socioeconomic groups, including diverse patient cases in clinical education, preparing trainees to work with LGBTQ+ older adults, and recognizing the impact of immigration status and language barriers. Importantly, DEI in gerontology and geriatrics must avoid reducing culture to stereotypes. Cultural competence is not memorizing traits about how this group behaves. That approach risks reinforcing essentialism, or the idea that all members of a particular demographic or group need or want the same things. Instead, culturally sensitive care requires asking open-ended questions, eliciting individual goals, and remaining attentive to structural context. For example, advanced care planning conversations may be influenced by cultural norms around autonomy, family authority, or religious belief. But assumptions must never replace inquiry. A major evolution in thinking about cultural competence is the recognition that interpersonal awareness is insufficient without structural awareness. Structural competence asks questions like, how do policies affect access to care? How do insurance systems shape treatment options? How do housing instability and transportation barriers affect health outcomes? And how do immigration policies influence eligibility for benefits? In gerontology and geriatrics, structural inequities often manifest in disparities in long-term care access, differences in home health eligibility, language access gaps, and unequal distribution of caregiver burden. Healthcare administrators in particular must consider how organizational policy can either mitigate or perpetuate inequity. Cultural competence at the systems level requires examining hiring practices, workforce diversity, interpreter services, and community partnerships. One of the most powerful and sometimes underappreciated tools for cultivating cultural sensitivity is the humanities. In her article, Thinking Differently About Aging, author Lenny Marshall argues that ageism has measurable cumulative health effects, and that interventions reducing ageist beliefs can significantly extend life expectancy. Research cited in that article demonstrates that Individuals with more positive perceptions of aging live, on average, 7.5 years longer. And exposure to age focused educational interventions, especially those involving discussion and reflection, reduces ageist attitudes. The humanities, including literature, film, narrative writing, and visual arts, provide structured opportunities to challenge stereotypes and humanize aging experiences. Discussion based learning, particularly when paired with reflection, has been shown to produce measurable changes in age related attitudes. This matters because ageist beliefs are not merely socially harmful, they are biologically consequential. Simply put, the research shows that ageism can negatively impact the health of older adults. Thus, engaging with stories of aging, especially stories that reflect diverse racial, cultural, and socioeconomic backgrounds, deepens empathy and disrupts simplistic narratives of decline. All right, let's translate all of this into practice. At the individual level, some strategies we can employ include engaging in structured self reflection about personal biases, using narrative exercises to examine assumptions about aging, and seeking continuing education in DEI and gerontology. Clinical level strategies include beginning encounters by asking, "What matters most to you?" Using open ended questions rather than assumption based statements, involving family members appropriately while respecting cultural norms, using trained interpreters when needed, and recognizing and addressing sensory impairments that may affect communication. Finally, some organizational level strategies include incorporating DEI into geriatrics training programs, reviewing institutional policies for unintended bias, developing partnerships with community organizations serving diverse elders, and investing in workforce diversity and age-friendly initiatives. Cultural competence must be embedded in systems. Unfortunately, it's not enough to leave it to individual goodwill. Let's step back and connect this lecture to the broader course. In Module 1, we discussed successful aging. Definitions of success vary across cultures. Some emphasize autonomy, others emphasize relational harmony. As such, applications of the successful aging paradigm may work in some cultural contexts, but not all. In Module 3, we explored emotional development. As discussed then and re-emphasized here, cultural norms shape how emotions are expressed and regulated. In Module 4, we examined family and community. As we discussed then, cultural expectations influence caregiving patterns and social roles. Overall, comparative aging studies show us that policy and culture are intertwined. Cultural competence is thus the applied bridge connecting all of these themes. To conclude, cultural competence in gerontology requires more than awareness. It requires humility, structural understanding, and intentional action. The humanities remind us that aging is a lived experience, not an abstract concept. Evidence shows that reducing ageist beliefs improves both attitudes and health outcomes. No approach to aging is culturally neutral. Every interaction reflects assumptions about independence, productivity, family, and value. As you reflect on this module, consider this question. How can you move from cultural awareness to structural action in your professional role? This concludes the third and final lecture for Module 5. If you have any questions about the material covered in this lecture, please contact your instructor for this course. Thanks for watching. Pass it. I'll spend it in you.